Thank you for letting me take the time to share that with you. Now I'm actually going to bring up Tim. I didn't want to take up too much of his time, but Tim has become a really good friend. We were just talking, and 10 years ago is when Kelsey and I got to meet Tim and his wife. And I've shared the story of going to a marriage retreat that was really powerful, where I had confessed something to Kelsey. It was kind of awkward because we weren't actually by ourselves. We were at a table with another couple. Tim and his wife was the other couple. And he.
It was super awkward.
I would imagine.
It was awkward for Rob. It was super.
Yeah, I was like, I have no idea what they're thinking right now. But we were just talking like, how cool is it that it was 10 years ago, March of 2013, you said? And it's been cool to see how our relationship, we've just been able to become friends and be friends, and he's been a huge supporter of what we're doing with church and coffee and all that stuff. And he says he's a Bible nerd. I believe it. And he is. He reads the books that I would only read if it was assigned to me and that I was getting school credits for. But he loves history and all that stuff. And so the knowledge that he has is incredible. The way that he's able to teach is incredible. I know he said he's going to do something a little different and it'll feel different, and I'm excited about that. But please give a nice warm welcome to my friend Tim.
So most of what Rob said was true. It is true. 10 years ago, I knew who Rob was in passing. I'm going to start off by saying I am a massive hypocrite because I go to a mega church down the road, and yet I'm here today, and I am convinced that this is more church than most churches around. And the reason for that is the early church adopted a title for themselves called The Way, because their goal was to follow the way of Jesus. And as they lived that out, they found unique ways to show primarily compassion to people. In a society where the dominant power of Rome saw weakness as something to be exploited, the church stepped in and countered that heavily. And you get to the place where by the time you get to about the 4th century, you have a bishop, a church father named John Chrysostom, who says that mercy or compassion, they're interchangeable, imitates God and disappoints Satan. And that's how he identifies the massive movement that they're a part of, is that they are a people of compassion. So when Rob said that I'm a Bible nerd, that's kind of true and kind of false, in that I am much more of a history nerd, and that as I read the Bible, the things that have impacted the way I understand the Bible have not been theology books or sermons, but rather ancient history books. The most prominent is a book by a guy named Tom Holland. He wrote a book called Dominion, and he looks at how Christianity kind of changed from when it was started to what we have today. In 21 chapters, he basically outlines how the entire trajectory of the Western world has been changed by Christianity. And it's primarily because there are small pockets of people who make differences that then impact the regions around them. And then those get promulgated out as the people move. It all starts, though, with Jesus and how we understand him. And so like Rob said, I'm doing something different today. We're focusing on the text of Mark chapter 5, verses 1 to 20. I have one slide, and it's a map, because I don't want us to be completely anchored on the text, but rather the story that the text is telling. So I'm actually going to read it 6 different times, and each time will be a slightly different perspective I want you to try and imagine. Because the way I think the Jesus story works is that Jesus is that jewel, that precious gemstone. And that as we find more and more ways to view that story of Jesus, we will get a better, more accurate picture of not just who Jesus is, but also the God that he is. Because we're told that Jesus is the most perfect representation of who God is. And if we understand Jesus really well, that means that we understand who God is even better. And so as we do this today, we are focusing on the story of the demon-possessed man. And I have the map up here because I want you to know this is the region that they're talking about. All those shaded regions, they're called the Decapolis, the 10 cities. And those are 10 regions where these cities were the prominent regions in this area. They are Gentile region. They are not Jewish, but they are very, very close to what would be considered the Jewish territory. That little blue dot kind of up near the top, that's the Sea of Galilee. We're very familiar to the Jesus story. But this is the region where Jesus and his followers are at in this point. And so what I want to do is I want to take this and realize that the region that they are in plays a massive role in their story. And as we tell the story, that's going to partly inform how Jesus acts and what he does. So like I said, we're going to be reading it through 6 times. I have 2 different translations. One is the Message, because I think it reads better. I'm taking no formal stance on the translation. I'm making no more formal stance on its veracity for actually biblical exposition, other than I think it's a very readable and listenable translation. And the other one is the NIV, because that's fairly common and standard, and we'll bounce between them. As we start, though, I want to read something. It comes from a 1914 edition of a calculus textbook. This is the opening introductory prologue. Considering how many fools can calculate, it is surprising that it should be thought either a difficult or a tedious task for any other fool to learn how to master the same tricks. Some calculus tricks are quite easy. Some are enormously difficult. The fools who write the textbooks of advanced mathematics, and they are at most clever fools, seldom take the trouble to show you how easy the easy calculations are. To the contrary, they seem to desire to impress you with their tremendous cleverness by going about it in the most difficult way possible. Being myself a remarkably stupid fool, I have had to unteach myself the difficulties and now beg to present to my fellow fools the parts that are not hard. Master these thoroughly, and the rest will follow. What one fool can do, another can. And if you replace calculus with Bible reading, I think that's true, is that we need to unlearn the complicated ways that we have been taught to read the Bible and instead see what Jesus is actually doing. Because almost every story where Jesus encounters somebody, it involves an underlying thread of compassion. And so as we read this text, I want to focus on that from various perspectives, because I think it'll give us a multifaceted view of the story and who Jesus is. So we're going to start. I'm going to read you Mark chapter 5, verses 1 to 20. Like I said, it's not on the screen, but if you want to go there, you're more than welcome to, but I'm going to read it the first time. And all I want you to do is just, what hits you from this passage? Is there anything that stands out to you that as we talk through it might pose a question? Now, Rob made a comment that, I'm a Bible nerd, and I love the act of teaching. So if there are questions that we don't get to, let's discuss it, but wait until we go through all the different various readings, because I want to highlight some of the points that are there, and hopefully it will inform it. But as we read through the first time, just listen to the cadence and the pattern and the rhythm and what Jesus does and what he doesn't do and who's interacting. So here we go, Mark chapter 5, verses 1 to 20. Then they arrived on the other side of the sea in the country of the Gerasenes. As Jesus got out of the boat, a madman from the cemetery came up to him. And he lived there among the tombs and graves, and no one could constrain him. He couldn't be chained and couldn't be tied down. He had been tied up many times with chains and ropes, but he broke the chains, snapped the ropes. No one was strong enough to tame him. Night and day he roamed through the graves and the hills, screaming out and lashing himself with sharp stones. And when he saw Jesus a long way off, he ran and bowed in worship before him, and then howled in protest. "What business do you have, Jesus, Son of the high God, messing with me? I swear to God, do not give me a hard time." And Jesus had just commanded the tormenting evil spirit, "Get out of this man." Then Jesus asked him, "Tell me your name." And he replied, "My name is Mob. I am a rioting mob." Then he desperately begged Jesus not to banish them from the country. A large herd of pigs was grazing and rooting on a nearby hill, and the demons begged him, "Send us into the pigs so that we can live in them." And Jesus gave the order. But it was even worse for the pigs than for the man. Crazed, they stampeded over a cliff into the sea and drowned. Then those tending the pigs were scared, bolted, and told their story in town and country, and everyone wanted to see what had happened. They came up to Jesus and saw the madman sitting there wearing decent clothes and making sense, no longer a walking madhouse of a man. Those who had seen it told the others what had happened to the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And at first they were in awe, and then they were upset over the drowned pigs. And they demanded that Jesus leave and not come back. And as Jesus was getting into the boat, the demon-delivered man begged to go along, but he would not let him. And Jesus said, "Go home to your own people. Tell them your story, what the master did and how he had mercy on you." The man went back and began to preach in the 10 towns, the Decapolis, about where Jesus had done for him, and he was the talk of the town. So the story starts with Jesus in this region of the Decapolis, and if you see that blue dot, that Sea of Galilee, right where the blue dot meets that top brown part, that's the region he's in, the Gerasenes. There's a city up there. We're not really sure specifically where he went because it's a region, but it seems like he's more in the north part. So he's kind of on the fringes. He's in between what would be considered like a territory, a settled region, and something that's kind of wild lands, wilderness, the outside realm. We're not really sure where this is exactly, but it seems like he's on the periphery of where people live. He's getting away. And in that region, Jesus has trouble. He can't escape because there's always somebody who needs him. Now, this whole region, the whole map you see at this point in time is also controlled by another power, namely the Empire of Rome. Rome had, further north, they had a legion that was stationed there called the 10th Legion, and they were a brutal, effective, long-storied legion. By the time of the biblical text writing, they'd been in existence for give or take 150 years, and they would have continued to exist for another 350 or so. So they're a legion that will be around for about 500 years. The 10th Legion was stationed further north in Syria, and their symbol was a pig, was the boar. What we get told by Josephus, who's a first century historian, is that when Rome decided to come down and destroy Jerusalem in 70 AD, they wiped out all 10 cities of the Decapolis, crucifying most of the men that took up arms against them. This region was completely leveled by a legion, by a mob of soldiers, whose symbol was the boar. And as I give you this, does part of that seem to fit the story? Does part of that fit with maybe there's something else going on here? Does this mob fit the Roman army? Do the pigs seem to have another tie-in somewhere? Cool, you said yes. We're going to go on. Nobody said yes, but I saw it. So now we're going to read it again, but this time we're going to go from the NIV, and I want you to put yourself in the position as best you can of a first century Jew. And I'm only going to read some of the highlighted sections because I want to focus on, there's going to be 6 parts that we read, kind of a verse here and a verse there, and we're going to talk through them on different levels. So from a Jewish perspective, first off, in verse chapter 1, it says, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. And we already can identify that Jesus is going to the Gentiles. He's not in Jewish territory anymore. He's in a region that is other, strange, foreign, not his people. Not people who were even looking for him or expecting him. Nobody who even would have understood what he was trying to accomplish. The next verse says, he got out of the boat, and a man with an impure spirit came up from the tombs to meet him. And this man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with a chain. See, from the Jewish perspective, this man is unclean. He is undesirable. He is on the fringes of what society is. Not just a madman, but living among the dead. He is unapproachable by any Jewish standard. And yet, Jesus doesn't run away. He encounters the man. He sees this man that is essentially unconquerable and engages with him, facing a problem that nobody else could control and doesn't matter for Jesus. This man, after their brief encounter, he shouts at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to him, "Come out of the man, you impure spirit." See, from the Jewish perspective, this pagan, demonized, raving, unclean man has just identified Jesus with the God of Israel. He has given him the most prominent place and title that was possible, a charge that would have been blasphemous and punishable by death in the Jewish world. But here we have a Gentile, unclean man recognizing something unique and special about Jesus. I think it's often the case where the people that are maybe on the outs have the ability to see something that we've missed, to tap into something that resonates with who we are and what we need and expose a part of what is so obvious to others and we just can't point in ourselves. The man then responds, Jesus says, what is your name? And he responds, I am Legion. And this is the same title that the Roman army would have given to one of their massive armies. The Roman army was made up of many legions. At its pinnacle, it was about 60 legions. But this legion was stationed, the one that's here is stationed only a couple hundred miles away. And the name Legion would have struck a chord with anybody. Similar to the way that we would say maybe atomic bomb, you know exactly destruction and chaos. The Legion, that name resonated in a way that did not give you comfort. And Jesus responds, and he says, for we are many. So who knows what's going on, but there's many demons that are here. And they begged Jesus, this form of power comes and they beg of Jesus not to mess with them, to actually have compassion on them. And we see that as Jesus then sends the demons, this legion of demons, into these pigs, this collection, this herds of swine, this who knows what's there, some 2,000, I think it says. And what we find is that the pigs are unclean and the man is unclean, but Jesus is willing to separate the need of the man, even though he's on the outs, and has compassion on the man instead of the pigs. Because the pigs are possession, and the pigs are property, and the pigs are wealth, but they don't matter because of the needs of the man. So the pigs go rushing off, and they drown, and the people are shocked. And as we end it, the man wants to go with Jesus. And as Jesus so often does, he doesn't allow people to follow him in the moment. You see that with Jesus a couple of times. When the man wanted to come, he said, no, go back to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And what we see once again from Jesus here is that Jesus realizes that this man is in a unique position to meet the needs of his people around him. Much like you are here with compassion. You have a foothold in this place, and soon you'll have a foothold in Thomas Realty, and you will transform that place into something that's different, but you will have a presence that is among your people. And that is the movement of Jesus, is that we start among our people and work. We identify with the people around us. And whether that's going to be here in Anoka, or we have been chosen to be on a mission field, in whatever field it is, we identify with people and share the Jesus that we have encountered with them. But as we read a second time, this is the third time, but second from a perspective, we're going to flip it now. We're going to be a first century Gentile, somebody who doesn't understand the Jewish culture whatsoever, but somebody who would just understand their region. It'd be very similar to how we are today. So the first point, Jesus and his followers arrive on the shore, and what we see initially is that as they gather, Jesus is an outsider. He is a Jew traveling into a pagan land. He's an outsider. He likely wouldn't have been welcomed unless he paid some sort of tax or toll. As he gets out of the boat, you have this madman once again coming up to him. And what we find is that as we read external sources, and Josephus tells us that this region was not just very, very, from the Jewish pagan, but very steeped in mysticism and witchcraft. So you have a region where, in a land where people practice witchcraft and idolatry, this guy is still considered too extreme. The madman is not just odd because he's not Jewish, he's extreme even by the extreme culture of the day. He is so far beyond help that he is on the outside. He is quite literally the most outside possible ring of society for his day, even among the pagans. And then when the man comes up to him, he says, what do you want me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? And you have in a pagan culture an identification of Jesus as Son of the Most High God, a title where he would have been preeminent among a pantheon, a plethora of gods that existed in the Roman world, in the pagan world. The Greek culture was famous for their pantheon of Zeus and Hera and of all these different characters. And this madman recognizes Jesus as being equal with the highest of the divine order. And then he once again says, when I read the message, it says, my name is Mob, my name is Legion. And once again, from the same perspective of the Jews, this would have been the symbol of oppression, a force that is oppressing the people by massive taxation, massive rules and laws, massive weights of an empire that needed to be supported. It's been documented that this region of the empire, not the Jewish region, but the Gentile region, sometimes had tax rates of up to 70% to support the empire. If loans were taken out, they were done at 95% at times. Interest rates. Rome exploited this region. And so when you hear a Gentile saying, we are legion, we are mob, it doesn't, once again, enforce security. It enforces exploitation. It reinforces abuse. It reinforces a system that is meant to crush and beat the people down to support the empire. And then we have the story of Jesus where he sends the demons out of the man into into the herd of pigs. And what we get here is, from the Jewish perspective, it's unclean. But from the Gentile perspective, this is income. This is food. This is a way of life where all of a sudden their entire income stream for who knows how many people is gone. Maybe they are able to recover the carcasses out of the lake. I don't know what that looks like or feels like or how you would do that. But at the end of the day, this is mass amounts of wealth and income and food that they don't have anymore. And from the Gentile perspective, this is infuriating because Jesus chooses to destroy their way of life. But he does it because the man is so much more valuable. And this man then ends up having a purpose, as we see at the end, that Jesus tells him to go back in his region because the Gentiles would have been more likely to have listened to a man that they had seen raving and lunatic that was uncontrollable, now back in his right mind, being able to be there. From the Gentile perspective, what Jesus did was painful. It was hard, but it was also a way of his message encountering the culture in a way that would not have been heard or understood without that raving man put in his right mind. The next way we're going to read is from a first century Roman perspective. We're going to lay out a bit of what Rome would have seen in this. So from Rome's perspective, this whole region, the whole map is just property. They don't care at all about what it is. It's part of a region called Judea. You think of it as the United States. Nobody really cares where you're at. If you travel abroad, say I'm from America, I'm from Minnesota. Doesn't matter. I can travel to Wisconsin without having to have a passport. Nobody cares. Rome was indifferent as to what happened in their region as long as they paid their taxes. But see, when the man gets out and he comes to Jesus and he admits, you are Jesus, Son of the Most High God, that is a deeply, deeply political statement. Because in this first century, the only person that was Son of God was the emperor. That was an official title he had adopted for himself. And by doing this, this confession to a Roman ear would have been akin to Jesus as emperor. Jesus is a rival for our Caesar. This is a deeply political and dangerous statement that could have been made. And Mark makes this type of statement numerous times throughout his book. He actually starts chapter 1, verse 1 with the story of Jesus, the Son of the Most High God, or Son of the God. Once again, we go on, and Jesus takes those demons that he encounters, and once again, he sends them into the pigs, right? And the pigs go off. But this matters for Rome because these pigs would have been both food for the army and taxes. And now Rome is going to have to deal with how does this region maybe not fulfill their taxes. See, Rome's going to get their taxes in one way or another. Eventually, this whole region of 10 cities will be completely flattened in 69 or 70 AD, some 40 years later, because the Emperor Tiberius, general at the time, has to put down a rebellion. See, Rome doesn't care about how you feel, what you do, what you think, as long as you pay your taxes and give your allegiance. And Jesus won't play that game. He will do what's best for the man who is in need at the expense of Rome getting their taxes, at the expense of the empire being comfortable and okay. And then finally, when we get down to the end, was that when Jesus says to the man, go back to your own people, what we see there is that Jesus has mercy on this man in a way where Rome would have seen a man that was now able to be exploited. See, the man was unconquerable, much like the Roman legions were. But when Jesus puts it in his right place, this man, Rome would have now seen this man as somebody that could produce income and produce taxes. And Jesus sees his job as being to go back and share the good news of who Jesus is with his people. The way Jesus pits himself versus Rome in this story is that Jesus is for the man and Rome is to use the man. Jesus is for the people and Rome is to use and exploit the people. And finally, the last way I want to read is, how do we read this as a 21st century American? Because that's really what it comes down to, is who cares what a first century Jew would have thought about this text? because we're living here today. And if we don't apply it, we're lost. So once again, as they arrive at the Sea of the Gerasenes, we once again encounter that Jesus is going to the others. He's going to those who are not like him, who don't look like him, talk like him, act like him, have the same religious background or tolerance that he has. Excuse me. As Jesus gets there, he's encountered by the madman. And I think the way this can be read for us is that there are a number of people who are oppressed, whether it's by demonic forces, spiritual attack, addictions that they have either chosen to take on over time slowly, or addictions that they have been forced on them, places that they have been exploited by a system that's in place that they can't escape from. A number of ways that people can be oppressed by just outside forces that I don't think they want to have, but don't have a way out, or at least not a readily made way out. And when Jesus encounters him, we have the dialogue back and forth, and when the man says, what business do you have with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? This is a question of allegiance for us. What are we going to do with Jesus? Do we believe he is that Son of the Most High God? Does he have that place of preeminence for us? Does he have that highest form of allegiance that would have been demanded by somebody who was Son of the Most High God, who would have been rival to an emperor? Are we willing to go that far in our allegiance to Jesus? And after Jesus dialogues with him and says, tell me your name, he replied, my name is Legion. But if we replace that with, my name is military, my name is defense spending, my name is Patriot missile or Apache helicopter, does that hit us the wrong way? My name is destructive force for good, the world's police. Does that reconcile with the Jesus story? Because this is for us becoming a political issue, because the way of Jesus works against a lot of what our society is working towards. The way of Jesus is a way of restoration and healing through self-sacrifice, not through other sacrifice. And then when we get down to it, the passage about the large herd of pigs being casted or running into the sea, that's income. That is capitalism at the extreme. How do we maximize our profit off of our little resources? And then if that's taken from us, how do we respond? What do we do when the very thing Jesus is calling us to impacts our way of life? Does he still have that title, Son of the Most High God, and that place of preeminence? Or do we need to choose between the two? And then finally, when Jesus said, go home to your own people and tell them your story, what the Master has done for you, had mercy on you, he's once again calling us to be his ambassadors among the people that we are around. So as I wrap up this morning, this is why I think this looks far more like church than most other places, is because from the moment Rob pitched the vision, I was beyond ecstatic, because he wasn't trying to fix a massive system and be an idealist. He was trying to fix a system for one person at a time, because the individual is what matters. And the way that the Jesus movement has always worked is by people being real and honest with other people as they make those connections. That the stories of people converting 1,000, 3,000 like Peter did are so rare and far apart that they don't actually form the pattern we should follow. That the early Christians were called the way because they lived out the way of Jesus, and by doing so made converts to the Jesus way. So once again, I want to read it the last time. I'm going to read the whole passage as we go through. I want you to think about, how do these different facets of what this text could mean, how do they play out in the way we actually choose to live it out as a Christ follower? See, so they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. Once again, this is where we are to be for the other people. And when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. See, Jesus overcomes the unconquerable man. He overcomes the man that nobody else could have control over, and does it through compassion. See, for he had often been chained hand and foot, and they tore his chains apart. Verse 6, when he saw that Jesus from a distance, he ran down and fell at his knees in front of him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In Jesus' name, don't torture, in God's name, don't torture me. For Jesus had said to him, come out of this man, you impure spirit. The question I have is, do we recognize Jesus as this same God that the man did? Are we willing to live that way consistently? Jesus asked, what is your name? The man answered, my name is Legion, or war, or oppression, or exploitation, or abuse. He replied, for we are many, too many to be overcome. He begged Jesus again and again not to send him out of the area. We see there is that once again, Jesus will overcome, but he does so by being the Prince of Peace rather than the war-bringing general, the war-mongering emperor. Verse 11, a large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them. Jesus gave them permission. The impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. And once again, we see Jesus having compassion on the man as opposed to keeping the prophets in place. That people matter more than prophets. That's been a kind of a slogan the last couple of years among different companies, but people over prophets. That's part of the Jesus way. And they said, those tending the pigs ran off, reported this in the town and countryside. They went out to see what was happening. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there dressed in his right mind. And those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then they began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. And as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed began to go with him. But Jesus did not let him go, but said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell the region, these 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. I think after we encounter Jesus, we are to be for the people around us. Is that we are to be Jesus people by how we live for the other. So as we apply this, as we go, what does this actually mean? So I gave you a ton of information in a very, very short period of time. And the goal was to present you with maybe an idea or two on a way you can see Jesus differently from where we came into this morning. And the way I want to leave you with is that Jesus, this story of Jesus meets every single place that our circumstances could be oppressing us. Jesus encounters our oppression by our internal circumstances, the demon-possessed man who just couldn't possibly be in his right mind. Jesus encounters the oppression from our external circumstances, when the man was chained and bound in the region that was taxed to the point of starvation by the Roman Empire. Jesus encounters our oppression by our spiritual circumstances. This man who was demon-possessed, and then the people around him who were terrified that they wanted Jesus to leave, he still leaves somebody among them that is willing to tell the Jesus story. He encounters us in our oppression by our political system or our economic system, and that people matter far more than what we can do for our profits and for our bottom line. And at the end of the day, what Jesus does through this story is that Jesus offers freedom from any form of oppression that we will ever encounter. And he does it through compassion and love and mercy. And he allows us to then be part of his overcoming force. As I close, there's an early letter among the churches in early Christianity called the Epistle of Diognetus. I think I'm saying that correctly. And in there's a title that's given to Christians, and it's the term Nikomenos. And what it means is the unconquerable ones. That's a title the early Christians had earned for themselves among their pagan peers as being unconquerable as Jesus followers. And so I want to leave you with today is, as you are a part of this community, strive to be a community that is the Nikomenos, that the unconquered ones, the ones who refuse to cater to what society looks like, the ones who refuse to keep somebody on the outside fringes because they're not right enough. They're not like us enough. Because Jesus is the only way that we will ever be free from any and every form of oppression that we can encounter.